Hey guys, welcome back to another video. This is Gabe with Indigo Software, genuine Microsoft software for less. In today's video, we're covering a complete beginner's guide to Microsoft Excel. We're going to be using Office Professional Plus 2021 on Windows. However, no matter what version of Excel you're using, most of the steps shown in this video will be the same. Before we get started with the video, if you guys are interested in purchasing Microsoft Office, Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows Server, remote desktop licenses, or a wide variety of other Microsoft software at a great price, be sure to check out Indigo Software. We'll leave those links down below. So without further ado, let's jump in. All right, guys, so here we are inside of Microsoft Excel. I just launched the application, and by default, it's going to bring us to what's called the File tab. So the File tab is going to give us a basic menu navigation system. It's also going to give us our account settings, our Office settings, as well as options for the application itself. Now, since this is a beginner's guide, we are going to cover a lot of the features that will help get you started in Excel, and it will help you to understand how to analyze data with this software. Be sure to stay tuned for intermediate and advanced videos that we're going to release in the future for Excel. One quick mention we wanted to make is that if you have not already installed Office and you'd like to see a tutorial on how to do so, we have a video covering that step by step, and you can watch that right here. All right, guys, so getting back into Excel, this is our Home tab, and this is again inside of the File tab. And you'll see something like this when you launch Excel. Now let's start on the actual Home tab itself. We have a little section right here called New. It's going to give us options for a new blank workbook. Next to that, we might have a custom template. And then the rest of these are Excel templates. So these are templates that I could search for or select and use, and I could start my workbook with one of these. Okay, moving down, we have a search bar. So here we could search for past documents if we'd like to. We would also have our previously created Excel documents below, any of which I could select and open and start to edit. We also have a pinned tab and a shared with me tab that we could access at any time. All right, let's explore the new tab. So below Home is new. This is going to give us even more options for templates. So up at the top here, we have a blank workbook. This here is again a custom template that I've created. So you may or may not see something like this. Then below that, we have all of our templates. I could search for something if I want. For example, let me type in budget. And we'll see what comes up. Here we can see we have personal monthly budget and all these other templates that have been created, and we can use any of these that we would like. We have a handful of suggested searches that we could pick. We can also switch between Office and personal. Below that, we have a tab called Open. Open is going to basically give us more options for opening previously accessed documents. We could also open a CSV, for example, or we could open Excel workbooks that are stored locally on our computer or in OneDrive. So this is where we would go to open those. Below that, we have a tab called Share. We'll come back to this later. And then these other options here will be available once we're actually working inside of a workbook. Now, the last two things that we have available here on this page, the last few things we have available here from the File menu are Account and Options. Okay, so let me go back to File here and let's start with Account. So here we could switch our license. We can also access updates. We could update now. And we have some information about Excel. We could also change our theme settings. For example, if we want to switch to system setting or white. We also have colorful. I'm going to keep mine on dark gray for now because that's what I prefer. All right, and then down in the options tab here, we have a bunch of customizable settings. We won't be covering this much in this tutorial, but in the intermediate and advanced videos, we will be customizing this menu. Okay, so now that we've covered the basic navigation of the application, let's go ahead and get into an actual blank workbook. I'm going to select blank workbook here from the Home or from the New tab, and that's going to bring us into our sheet. Now, if you're already familiar with Office applications, there's a certain layout when we start working on a document. This layout is broken up into tabs. So we have Home, Insert, Page Layout, Formulas, Data Review, View, Developer, and Help. On each tab, we have groups divided by these little lines here. And these are what make up what we call the ribbon. So this whole section here is what's known as the ribbon, divided into groups, and then each group has relevant tools. Similar to Word, we have clipboard, font, and alignment. So Word will have basically the same things here if you're already used to using Microsoft Word. And then we have number. So this is going to be some basic formatting things. We can format as a currency or percentages. We have more formatting options, and then we have Excel styles, followed by a few other groups at the end here. We have add-ins, we have editing, and we have cells. And so our Home tab here is where most of our work is going to get done, and we will likely live here for the majority of the time. Let's explore a little bit about how to navigate the actual sheet itself. And then after that, we'll start to make a document, and we'll show you guys how to use the tools along the way. Okay, so there are a few ways to navigate throughout the spreadsheet. First of all, when we start a new Excel workbook, by default, we will be on sheet 1. We can rename this at any time by right-clicking and hitting rename. And I'll call this test 1. and I'll hit enter to save that. And then I could also add new sheets down below just by hitting this little plus button here. So now we have sheets that are separate from each other, but since they're in the same workbook, they can actually still relate to each other and pull data from each other. Now, when we're on a sheet, we have a few different ways of moving around. The first way is to click onto cells. If I click on a cell once, I will be on the cell. Now, if I want to actually go inside of this cell, I do that by double clicking. So now I can write information inside of the cell rather than just being on the cell. Now, we could click around to get to the cell that we want, or we could also use some keys on our keyboard. One easy way to get around is to use the arrow keys. So right will bring us right, left will bring us left, and up and down. So we can very easily jump around to different cells. Again, we will be on the cell until we double click it. We could also use enter and tab. So if I hit enter, we will go down. If I hit tab, we will go to the right. We can see it's going to start on the column that I first selected every time that I hit enter. And then if I want to go backwards, I can hold shift and hit tab. It's going to bring me left. And if I hit shift and enter, it's going to bring me up. So enter is up and down, tab is left and right. One way that we could put it whenever I click on top of a cell is that I'm making a selection of cells. And the selection when I'm on top of one cell is 1, but I could also click and drag this to expand it to make a larger selection. And we call this a range. So this is going to be a range of values or inputs. And we can use this to input data into formulas. So if I click and drag, I can actually select any range that I want to on the spreadsheet. So again, I click and drag, and that's going to select any range that I want. And when I have the range selected, I have various options on how I might want to manipulate this data. Now, in terms of selecting, we also have a few other things we can do. We have, again, our columns here. That's going to be A through Z, and then it's going to double up. And then we have our numbers, which just goes down in numerical order. Now, if I click on a number, it's going to select that entire row. Any formatting changes I make are going to apply to the entire row. Same thing for columns. If I click the letter, I can apply changes to the entire column. And similar to how I can click and drag cells, I can click and drag onto columns as well. One thing I like to do inside of Excel is actually enlarge the view a little bit. And we can do that in the very bottom right here. So if I click and drag on this slider, we're going to zoom in. This helps us to have a much clearer view of what you're doing, especially on a larger monitor like this. Now, one more thing in terms of selections, we can do Control and A, and that's going to select absolutely everything on the sheet. All right, so with that said, I'm going to go ahead and start drafting a basic document. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a monthly budget tracker. We're going to use the other two sheets here to create inputs, and this is going to be sort of our dashboard page. So I'm going to title this dashboard. And let's actually just use one other sheet. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this one. I can right click and hit delete, and then I'll rename this one to expenses. Okay, so we have our dashboard and we have our expenses. Now, the first thing I may want to do to help this look a little bit nicer is write in a bit of a title and a description. Now, this is totally optional, but I do think it's a great way to manage your spreadsheets. I'm going to title this monthly budget tracker 2025. So all of these words are contained in just this one cell, but we're going to change that in a little bit. And maybe what makes more sense here is actually to go ahead and separate these by months. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new one here, and we're going to call this January and February. Okay, so back inside of the dashboard here, if I click and drag this, so we have a range of 10 cells, and I have this button here I can press called merge and center. By doing that, I can basically merge all these cells into one cell, and centering the text makes it look a little bit more like a title. Okay, and then I also just did Control B and Control U to underline and bold. Maybe we'll just do bold. And I can also align the text in the middle so that it's not at the very bottom like that. All right, I might increase the font a few points. And let's say I want to add a little highlight color to the back. So again, these are kind of just visual cues that help make it easy to keep track of. So I'll do month, and then again, I'll hit tab. We're going to do allocated, actual, and difference. Okay. Now, let's say I don't want to have an empty cell here. I can actually go back to this. I'll hit merge and center again, and I'll just shorten this down so that it's only on these 4 columns, and I'll hit merge and center again. I'll select these 2 cells and we'll hit no fill. So now this is actually just on top of our 4 columns that we're going to use. And I'm going to change this color. Actually, I'm not the biggest fan. Okay, I like that better. And then next up, I'm going to select these 4 cells here. And let's say I want to bold and italicize these, and I'll make the background like a light gray. I think that looks nice. All right, and then below this, I'll start adding the month. Now, one thing that's important to note is that if I start typing when I'm on a cell, it's going to overwrite anything that is currently inside of that cell. If I double click into the cell, then I can edit each individual character. One other thing I'm going to do here is you notice how this September is going into the next cell. It's not in this cell. We can see there's still nothing here. But if we want to fix that so that it all fits snugly, all we have to do is click and drag I'll do these 4 columns, and then I'll click in between the 2 columns and I'll double click. And that will automatically resize each cell so that the text fits. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and start filling out my January and February now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take these 3 columns and I'll Control and C to copy. I'm gonna go to January and I'm gonna paste it in the B column. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want this column to say expense type or category, because I wanna break these down by categories. Again, I'll select and double click between to make sure that this fits in there. And then another quick tip is if I select a cell that has the formatting that I want, in this case, bold, italic, and a fill color of gray, and I click Format Painter here on the Home tab, with this selected, I can click on this and it will basically paste the formatting. So I don't have to manually match this to these guys. I can just click the Format Painter and apply. All right, and let's just add a few categories here. We're gonna go housing, food, utilities, fun, and travel. Okay, so we have a few expenses. Let me allocate a little bit to each. And you can see I'm just typing in the number with no comma. We're gonna work on the formatting for the numbers later. Okay, so we have our allocated budget amounts. Now here's where I would take my actual. In a real world scenario, this is something that you could import, for example, from a bank statement where you could actually export it to a CSV and then import this and calculate it out that way. For the purpose of today's tutorial, I'm just gonna manually input some figures to show you guys how this all works. We have many other Excel tutorials on this channel, so if you wanna see more about this, be sure to check those out. All right, let's put in the actual here. Let's say I went under on rent and food. Maybe I went a little over on utilities. Maybe I went over on fun. And let's say I went under on travel as well. And here's where we're going to input our very first function. This is going to be a very simple one. We want to subtract the actual from the allocated. And basically the way that this works inside of Excel is we can start off a function by entering the equals sign. So if I hit equal, we're gonna type in the letter of our column and the number of our cell that we want. So in this case, it's B2, which is 2000. And we can see that it selects that. Now I could also just click it, right? So that's gonna select B2. If I want to subtract something from B2, I'll simply hit the hyphen for a minus, and then I can click or write the cell here as well. Let's do C2. And at this point, I just hit enter. Okay, so we have a $200 difference, and this is a positive number. Now, I don't have to do this for all of these cells because Excel has a very nice feature where I can click and drag down, and it's going to apply this to the relevant cell. So we can see here now it's B3, C3, B4, and C4. So again, clicking and dragging a formula brings down the inputs to the next cell below it. Okay, we're gonna do a few other things here. So we have total. Our allocated total is gonna be the sum of these, right? It's all of these added together. So let's do equals sum. When we input a function like this, we have to start with an open parentheses. And we do that after we input what the function is. So sum function, open parentheses, and then I'm gonna click and drag this. Or we could type B2 colon B6, which means B2 through B6. So those are 2 ways to specify a range. I find clicking and dragging to be the easiest. And then we can close the parentheses and hit enter. And this is going to be our sum figure. Again, we can basically do the same thing by dragging this over. Let's do the same thing here, equals sum, open parentheses, drag the range, select enter. Now, I didn't have to do that because remember, I can take this and drag it over as well. All right, and then let's do that for this too. Now, these don't really look like currency values, but if I click and drag this range here, we can format this as a currency by hitting this $sign. That's in the number section of the Home tab. So now we can see our values here. The parentheses means that it's a negative number. In order to get that to show up on this sheet, it's actually gonna be very easy. All we have to do is hit equals, and then let's go back over to January. And then we're just gonna click the cell that has the total number underneath allocated, and I'll hit this little check mark here. That's going to reflect the number that we have inside here. So for example, if I make this 550 instead of 450, this number goes up and it goes up here as well. We're gonna do the same thing for this. So let's hit equals, and then with the equals sign entered, we'll go back to January and click on our actual. And then we'll do the same thing for difference. So hit equals, January, and the total difference. So we can see our allocated budget amount for January was $4,700. Our actual spend was $4,678. And our difference was a positive 22. Okay, and then we could manually do the same thing for all of the other months. And anytime we go in and make changes, for example, let's say I decrease my food to 800 and maybe I spent 1,200. We're gonna see those changes reflected on this little dashboard that we made as well. There are a wide variety of other functions that we could use when we have data like this. And one thing we may want to do is to format it as a table. So let me go ahead and select this entire range of values and let's hit format as a table. And then here we have various options of what we want it to look like. I'll click one of these over here. I think this looks good and I'll press OK. And now we have a table. Basically, this is going to let Excel read this as the category type. So when we're selecting these columns in more complicated functions, it's able to recognize all of this properly. Now, another great feature of Excel is we can actually go ahead and hyperlink things if we want to. If I click on this cell and do Control and K, that's going to give us a hyperlink menu, and I can either select a local file on my computer. For example, I could download the PDF from my rent payment history and then actually link that to this if I want to go ahead and review it. So there's ways that we can use hyperlinking, or if you're sharing this document, we could also input a web address and have this link to that as well. All right, so we've pretty much gone over everything on the Home tab. Let's go ahead and check out some of the other tabs that we can use. The Insert tab is going to give us Table. We also have Pivot Table. We're also going to have access to things like pictures, shapes, and icons. And these are things that we can input all inside of Excel without having to go to a different application. You also might use the Charts group on a regular basis. This is going to give us access to pie charts or bar charts, and we could input the data. For example, from January through February, we could track that spending and how it might be changing over time. We're going to have many other features. We have line, column, win-loss. We have filters, links. We can add comments and insert a note about a part of the document. We've also got text, so we can add text box here and a few other things. And then we have symbols. So the Insert tab is probably the most commonly used tab aside from the Home tab. Now in page layout, we're going to have things like margins, orientation, size, print area, breaks. We can adjust our background. We could, for example, hide or show the grid lines if we don't want to see those. We could view or not view the headings, and those are, again, our columns and rows, the numbers and letters. And we're going to see various other layout adjustments that we could make. We have another tab here called Formulas, and this is going to separate our formulas into the type. And if I want to work with formulas here, I can go ahead and view them in these little drop-down menus, and we could use them straight from here if we'd like to. Again, we can also type them into our cell. We're also going to see some other options in the Formula tab. In the Data tab, we might be doing things such as getting data from a CSV. Here we can also access our Power Query editor. So for example, if I wanted to get data from a CSV that I downloaded from my bank, it's my bank statements, let's say, about my expenses, I could then use the Power Query editor, which would come up from here, and I could basically change my categories and manipulate my data so that when I input it into the sheet, it's already going to work with how I have this laid out. This is more of an intermediate category, and we plan to cover this more in depth in future videos. Another important part of the Data tab here would be the Sort and Filter. We can use this to very quickly go through our data and reorganize it or view certain things if we're trying to find them. So Sort and Filter are great tools. Let's say, for example, I want to add a filter to this. And when we filter, it's going to add these little drop down arrows. I can select what I want to filter out or what I want to remain there. Or I could also do number filters. Maybe I want to see something that's greater than 1,000. So let's do greater than 1,000. And I'll press OK. And now it's only going to show me figures that are greater than 1,000. And again, I filtered that based on this column. You can just as easily clear filters by clicking this and hitting clear filter. Now we could also sort. Let's say I click sort here and I want to sort by allocated. I'm going to keep this at cell values here and I want to go largest to smallest. So when I click that, all right, let's say I want to sort these and I want to know the largest to smallest in terms of my allocated budget. So let's go ahead and actually select everything except for the bottom because again, this is the total. And then I'll click sort and we're going to do sort by. This is where we can select which column we're sorting from. So in this case, I want to sort from allocated. I want to sort on cell values and I want to go largest to smallest. Let's press OK. You can see that that actually changed the total amount. So if I wanted to maybe track that separately, but again, that's an easy way to change how we're viewing our data. And Control Z or Command Z if you're on Mac is an easy way to undo any action. Now also from the Data tab, we're going to have advanced. So this is going to be like advanced filtering. And then we have data tools like data validation. These are tools that are used somewhat frequently. And then we're also going to have forecast and outline options as well. Next up in the Review tab, we can check our spelling and grammar as well as our statistics. We have some accessibility options, translating options, and then we also have some commenting options as well. And in addition to that, we have notes and we have some ways that we can protect this document. In the View tab, we have similar options to the Page Layout tab where we can change how we're viewing it. We have sheet view options, workbook view options, and so on. All right, and then we have a developer tab. We're not going to focus on this much until we get to the intermediate or advanced videos, but we do have a lot of developer options available in here. And then lastly, we have the help tab. From here, we can contact support, we can find some trainings, or we could use Microsoft Office forums for help. Now, in addition to all of this, we have a search bar at the top. We also have what's called our quick access menu, and this is actually customizable. So if I click this little drop down here, we have save, email, undo, or redo. And these are our quick options. All right, so I could click this to save, I could click this to undo, and these options will always be here no matter what tab I'm on. All right, so let's say that we are happy with our document. At this point, I'm gonna go ahead and save it, and I wanna make sure that I save it in a way that I can access it again in the future. Let's go to File, and I'm gonna click Save As. And then from here, let's click this PC because I wanna save this locally. Now I have a folder where I actually wanna keep this. It's called Important Documents. And let's say I just wanna call this Monthly Budget Tracking. If I save this as a .xlsx, which is the default, it's going to save it as a workbook document, which means it's going to save all of those changes that I just made. Another option in here that is very common is CSV. This is comma separated values, which means it's text inputs and not formatting. And this would just save the sheet. So whatever sheet we're on, if I click save as, it would save that sheet as a CSV. This is a very common file that a lot of applications can import. And so CSV might be commonly used as well, but I like to do XLSX and I'll click save. Now I can go ahead and close Excel, and at any time, let me go ahead and open it back up. And if I want to re-access that document here, you can see it right here. I could also go locate the file. All right, and here's the file, and all I have to do is double click to open this. And again, we can open it from Excel as well. We hope this video was very valuable for you guys. And again, be sure to stay tuned for intermediate and advanced Excel training videos as we plan to make those in the near future. Again, if you're interested in purchasing genuine Microsoft software at a great price, be sure to check out Indigo Software. We'll leave those links down below. As our channel continues to grow, we're constantly looking for new video topic ideas to make. If there's a video that you'd like to see us make, please let us know in the comments below. And most of these requests actually get made into videos. Lastly, a like and subscribe would be greatly appreciated as it helps to support the channel. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you guys next time.